What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker, and it's NBA trade rumor time. There are some reports going around. There's been a little bit of news going around that the Detroit Pistons might consider trading the first pick in the draft this year and essentially the right to draft Cade Cunningham, #1 overall. In this video, we're going to be talking about exactly that scenario, why this report would be coming out, why Detroit would potentially look to trade this pick. One team in particular that I think should be very aggressive in going up to try and get this pick. All that stuff is what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Quickly want to say thank you to you guys. I shouted out the Twitch streams and the live streams and stuff that I do every single week. In yesterday's video, a ton of y'all came over there, dropped a follow. I really appreciate that. You guys hung out with me yesterday for a couple hours. Again, Monday through Friday, a couple hours every single day. If you guys want to come hang out, Twitch is underneath me, and it's also in a socials link in the description. With all those things said, let's get started. Okay, Detroit trading the first pick of the draft. So this is a report via ESPN that isn't being definite about like, hey, Detroit is looking to trade the first pick in the draft. Like, it's not going that far, but it is saying that it's something they're considering, they're exploring their options, and it notes that they would probably be targeting big man Evan Mobley here, but they're also mildly intrigued by some of the other guards at the top of this class. And essentially this reads as Detroit obviously really likes Cade Cunningham, but maybe they don't see the gap as big between him and the rest of the top 3 or so players in this class as maybe a lot of people think that they should. Now, the idea behind trading away the first pick in the draft this year would be, as the article notes, to get some additional assets to make the #1 pick in the draft work for you in multiple different ways. Not just turn it into Cade Cunningham, but turn it into multiple first-round picks or maybe 2 players in this class rather than 1, because there are multiple teams in this draft that have multiple picks within the top 14. So those are multiple considerations here for Detroit, but there's a really interesting scenario that exists here that I just want to go ahead and jump the gun on and talk about, okay? The Oklahoma City Thunder are a team that are cited in this article as, hey, they could be a team that could possibly move up and get the first pick in this draft and get Cade Cunningham. If I'm Oklahoma City, I'm doing everything I can to get the first pick in this draft. Here's why. You have all these future first-round picks, right? They have 1 million picks between now and 2027. And I've talked multiple times about how that could be a disadvantage at certain points when it comes to trade negotiations, because everybody else in the league knows that you have multiple first-round picks. And if you're using them ideally to trade for a big-time star player, you know, Oklahoma City is not necessarily a place that guys are going to try and steer their way toward. So it might be a little bit more difficult to use these picks in an intelligent way than you might first think. But trading for the first pick in the draft is the perfect way to use these picks. You pair Cade Cunningham with SGA. Everybody thinks that Cade Cunningham is going to be this awesome player. He's got great size. That's incredible versatility between those two backcourt players. You've got your backcourt for the foreseeable future. And it's not a scenario where you could be trading for Bradley Beal and he could leave in a year or two. You don't know if he's going to be happy. If you trade for a guy that you select with the first overall pick, they're with your team for minimum 4 to 5 years, more likely 7 to 8 years. There's no real fear or risk of them leaving for the first handful of years of their career. So this would be a fantastic use of multiple first-round picks, and I would bet that whether it's New Orleans, whether it's Oklahoma City, whether it's any of these teams, that's why this rumor is out there. That's exactly why Detroit wants to let it be known that they would potentially be willing to part with the first overall pick, because they would probably only trade it away in a scenario in which they're getting a ton of value. They're waiting on a team to step up to the table and say, here, take all of our picks. We want the first pick in the draft. And Detroit suddenly is looking at, yeah, they lost out on the first pick in the draft this year, but maybe they get the 6th pick or whatever Oklahoma City has, either 5th or 6th, and multiple future firsts from all these different teams. And they're now turning a 1 pick into like 4 or 5. And Oklahoma City doesn't care. They've got another 15 waiting in the back they can use later on, but they've got Cade Cunningham now. That is a trade in a scenario that I think works beautifully for both teams if you're Detroit and you're not enamored with the idea of taking Cade Cunningham at #1 overall. Now, the other possibilities here also exist, that we see a Markelle Fultz-like situation where, yes, you do trade away the first pick in the draft, but you don't move all the way down to 5 or 6. You move down to 2, where you could potentially get Evan Mobley, where Houston is sitting, where Houston could be motivated to move up in this draft to get Cade, because Mobley and Christian Wood don't quite fit well together if you think Mobley is the guaranteed #2 guy in this class. Cleveland is another option. Maybe they don't really want to, end up with Jalen Green, or they just don't like their options at 3. They get Cade Cunningham, right? Or the New Orleans Pelicans are another team that is really, really intriguing here. It doesn't exist within the first handful of picks, but they, have multiple picks they can trade as well. So a lot of interesting scenarios. And again, I think, based off just kind of reading into this a little bit, Detroit is hoping that someone steps up with a giant offer. They're not going to trade away this pick for 2 picks, right? Cade Cunningham is clearly a very valuable asset. He's a guy they would love to have on their team. But if Oklahoma City, New Orleans, one of these teams wants to step up and provide a huge amount of draft capital in exchange for the first pick in the draft, they're absolutely going to listen, and they would honestly be wise to accept it. Both teams would, whether it's Oklahoma City, New Orleans, or Detroit. Now, let's look briefly at the history of the first pick in the draft being traded, because it doesn't really happen all that often. It's only happened a handful of times in NBA history, the most recent of which being Markelle Fultz being traded in 2017. That's the famous 1-3 swap where the Celtics swap 1 to 3. They get Tatum. The Sixers end up getting Fultz, and the Celtics get an extra first from, I want to say it was a Sacramento pick that turned into Romeo Langford, somewhere in there. It's essentially 1 for 3 plus an extra pick. Boston obviously did an incredible job there to trade back. Everybody in the league would have taken Markelle Fultz at number 1 overall. Boston really liked Jason Tatum, and they took advantage of that. They traded down, and then what happened with Fultz happened as he's trying to revive his career in Orlando. And then the other one that doesn't really count because it's not like the pick was traded as a pick the way it was with Boston and the way that it would be here potentially with Detroit. But Andrew Wiggins, the Andrew Wiggins-Kevin Love trade, Wiggins was drafted at the time that the Love trade went down. That move had already been made. It wasn't a trade as a pick, but still one of the more recent examples. So it's not something that happens incredibly often, despite the fact that it's happened twice in the last 6 years. If you go back even further than that, we're going back to like Chris Webber and then Joe Barry Carroll, and we're going way back. So again, not something that happens super often, despite the fact that it is becoming a little bit more common. Now, ultimately, I really have no idea if Detroit would actually trade this pick. If I had to bet on something happening right now, my bet would be chalk, which would be the Pistons stay there, they take Cade Cunningham, and the rest of the draft kind of goes the way we would expect it to at the top, with Mobley going 2 potentially, and then Jalen Green probably going 3 to Cleveland. But the way this lottery shook out, we talked about this in the lottery video, there's a possibility for a lot of movement because a lot of these teams ended up in scenarios, Detroit obviously doesn't count here, but like Houston ended up in a scenario that's a little bit odd for their roster, where maybe they get Jalen Green because, 1, maybe they just like him better, but 2, the Mobley-Christian Wood thing is a weird fit, and then that would work out beautifully well for Cleveland because they'd, I'm sure, love to have Evan Mobley instead of one of the guards in this class because they already have Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. But if it goes Mobley 2 and then Green 3, things can just get very weird at the top of this class very quickly, and as a result, we might see a significant amount of movement, including potentially the first pick in this draft. So ultimately, when I first read this, I didn't really put a lot of stock into it, right? When I first read the headline, but then I clicked on the article, I was like, wait, this makes a lot of sense. Detroit is clearly letting it be known that they're willing to listen to offers for the first pick of the draft, understanding what other teams are in the top 10 or top 15 of this draft lottery, of this draft order, that have multiple picks, whether it be this year or into the future, the ability to potentially get a huge offer in exchange for the first pick in the draft, and the ability for these teams to move up, and how exciting that would be. If I could snap my fingers and make something happen, just that would be so cool, it would be Oklahoma City or New Orleans moving up to the first pick in this draft and going and getting Cade Cunningham. He would be an awesome fit. By all reports, Cade Cunningham is an awesome player, and the fact that Detroit is looking to trade this pick potentially is not an indictment on Cade Cunningham. It doesn't mean they don't like Cade Cunningham. I think it's just an example of Detroit, intelligently, I might add, trying to be a bit opportunistic here, right? The last thing that I would caution against, though, is anytime you're considering trading the first pick in the draft, you have to think about possibly being the team that passed on a franchise level player, like generational franchise level player. Typically, those guys honestly don't go number 1 overall. They go, 2, 3, 4, 5, anywhere past number 1. A lot of time, like Luka Doncic, Trae Young, great examples, right? Incredible players did not go first in their respective drafts. So it's not something that happens incredibly often where the first pick in the draft guy is like a no-brainer, 100%. He's absolutely killing it in the league. But if you do trade away the first pick in the draft for the 6th pick and 1,000 firsts, and Cade Cunningham is an All-NBA player in 2 years, you're the team and you're the front office that traded away Cade Cunningham, and it becomes very difficult suddenly to find a new job, assuming you do get fired in Detroit. So that's something to consider. Is there's a reason why we don't typically see a lot of surprises with the first pick in the draft, because once there becomes a consensus about not only who should be taken first, but if that team should or shouldn't stay at number 1 overall, once a kind of consensus is reached, teams typically don't waver from that very much because they don't want to be the team, they don't want to be the franchise, they don't want to be the front office that passed on Cade Cunningham, that passed on Zion Williamson, that passed on whatever the case may be. So we'll see what ends up happening. I am really intrigued by this possibility. I love trade stuff. I love draft stuff. Draft trade stuff combining together is super exciting to me. I'm all in. We'll see. Like I said, it mentions Cleveland, Houston, New Orleans, and the Thunder as the 4 teams to kind of keep an eye on here. We still got some time, certainly before the draft starts, but leading all the way up to it, I'll be interested to see if Woj or Shams or anybody like that kind of corroborates this a little bit with a little bit more information on the Pistons possibly looking to trade the first pick in the draft. But that is going to be the end of today's video. And thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to leave a like rating on it. Consider subscribing to the channel as well if you are new. Be sure to look out for more videos from me coming up this weekend. I've got a Ben Simmons trade rumor video coming tomorrow. The day after that, we're going to be talking about the 2018 draft, how they've kind of become the future of the league, and then one more video on Sunday as well. So I got those planned out. Hope you guys enjoy them. Hope you enjoyed this one as well. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.